The crack of his hand against her face echoed across the parade ground like a gunshot. 2,000 Marines stood frozen in formation. The morning sun beat down on Camp Pendleton's asphalt. Not a single boot shuffled. Not a single breath was drawn. Rear Admiral Richard Harwell's palm was still raised, trembling with rage and disbelief at his own action. The young woman before him barely looked 22, maybe 5'3" in boots, didn't flinch, didn't cry out, didn't even blink. Blood welled from her split lip, a single crimson drop hitting the concrete between them with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the silence. She simply straightened her spine, turned her head back to center, and stared at him with eyes that held absolutely nothing. No fear, no tears, no anger, just emptiness. The kind of emptiness that comes from staring down a rifle scope at 2,000 meters and remembering every single face that appeared in the crosshairs. The kind of emptiness that comes from 47 confirmed kills. Admiral Harwell had just made the worst mistake of his 32-year career. He just didn't know it yet. The woman's name was Lieutenant Sarah Vaughn, but the 2,000 Marines watching didn't know that. The instructors flanking the Admiral didn't know that. Even Colonel Marcus Garrett, standing 20 feet away with his jaw clenched tight, only knew part of the truth. What they saw was a civilian contractor in olive-drab cargo pants and a simple V-neck shirt. What they saw was some Pentagon paper pusher who had wandered onto a Marine Corps parade ground without proper authorization. What they saw was exactly what she wanted them to see. What they didn't see was the daughter of a 3-star general. What they didn't see was a Marine Force Recon Scout sniper with 4 combat deployments. What they didn't see was a woman who had spent 18 months tracking a traitor through classified files and encrypted communications, following a trail of blood that led straight to the man who had just struck her. Sarah let the silence stretch. Let the Admiral's hands slowly lower. Let the 2,000 witnesses absorb what they had just seen. Then she spoke, her voice quiet and controlled, carrying across the parade ground with the precision of a well-placed shot. Admiral Harwell, you just assaulted a federal official in front of 2,000 witnesses. The Admiral's face went from red to purple. Security, his voice cracked. Get this civilian off my parade ground. Now. 2 military police officers started forward, then hesitated. They had seen her credentials earlier. Department of Defense. Clearance level so high that half the file was redacted. Authorization signed by the Secretary of Defense himself. Sir, one of them said carefully, she has authorization from... I don't care if she has authorization from God Almighty. Harwell's spittle flew. This is my command, my Marines, and I will not have some little girl playing soldier in the middle of my ceremony. Sarah finally moved, reached into her pocket with deliberate slowness, pulled out the leather credentials case, flipped it open, held it up so the morning sun caught the gold DoD seal. Admiral Harwell, she said, voice still perfectly calm, I'm here under direct orders from the Secretary of Defense. My credentials are valid. My assignment is classified. And with respect, sir, you just committed assault on a federal official conducting an authorized investigation. The silence that followed was absolute. Harwell stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath, the expensive cologne that couldn't quite mask his sweat, close enough to see the vein pulsing in his temple. You think anyone here is going to side with you? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think anyone cares about some Pentagon contractor who wandered onto the wrong base at the wrong time? Sarah didn't step back, didn't shift her weight, just stood there, 5'3" of controlled stillness, looking up at the 2-star Admiral like she was memorizing every detail of his face for a report she would write later. I think, she said softly, you should be very careful about what you do next, Admiral. His hand came up again. This time she caught it, not aggressively, not violently, just stopped it mid-air, her fingers wrapping around his wrist with the casual ease of someone catching a thrown ball. The movement was so fast, so effortless, that several Marines in the front row actually gasped. Harwell's eyes went wide. He tried to pull back. Couldn't. For 3 seconds, she counted them. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. She held his wrist in place. Long enough for him to feel the strength in her grip. Long enough for him to understand that she could have broken his arm if she wanted to. Long enough for the fear to creep into his eyes. Then she released him and stepped back. "I apologize, Admiral." Her voice was still perfectly calm. "Reflexes. It won't happen again." She turned and walked away. 2,000 Marines watched her go. Not one of them moved. Not one of them spoke. They just watched as this young woman, dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, blood still dripping from her chin, walked off the parade ground like she owned it. Like she had just won something. Harwell stood there, rubbing his wrist, his face a mask of shock and rage and something else. Something that looked almost like fear. Colonel Marcus Garrett watched the whole thing with his arms crossed, his jaw tight, his mind already racing through the implications. He knew who she really was. Not everything, but enough. Enough to know that Harwell had just stepped in something far deeper and more dangerous than the Admiral could possibly imagine. Enough to know that the next 72 hours were going to change everything. 18 months earlier. Syrian desert, October 2022. The Hindu Kush mountains rose like broken teeth against a sky so clear it hurt to look at. The kind of clear that meant you could see for miles. The kind of clear that meant someone else could see you too, if they knew where to look. Sarah Vaughn knew where to look. She lay prone on a ridgeline 1,400 meters from the valley floor. Her body molded into the rocky earth like she'd grown there. The Brat M82A1 rifle stretched out in front of her, bipod legs dug into the soil, scope trained on the abandoned village below where 8 Marines from 2nd Recon Battalion were about to walk into an ambush. They didn't know it yet, but she did. She'd been watching for 3 hours, watching the enemy fighters slip into position, counting them, cataloging their weapons, calculating angles and distances and wind drift with the part of her brain that had been doing these calculations since she was 12 years old. Since Master Gunnery Sergeant Daniel Cross had first put a rifle in her hands and said, "Let's see what you can do, kid." 150 hostiles, Taliban and foreign fighters, well-armed, well-positioned, waiting for the Marines to walk into the kill zone. Sarah's spotter, a barrel-chested gunnery sergeant named Pete Rollins, lay beside her with the spotting scope. "Phantom," he whispered using her call sign. "We need to call this in. Get air support, artillery, something." "No time," Sarah said. Her voice was barely audible, just a breath of sound. "They're moving now. 3 minutes to contact. Then we pull our guys back. They won't make it. Ambush is set up on their retreat route too." Rollins was quiet for a moment. Then, "Jesus, Phantom, you can't. Watch me." She had done the calculations in her head already. 150 targets, 8 Marines, 5 hours of daylight left. The math was simple. The math was always simple. The first shot came at 0347 hours. Range, 1,423 meters. Wind, 15 miles per hour, quartering from the southwest. Temperature, 112 degrees Fahrenheit, which meant the air was thin, which meant the bullet would travel faster, which meant she needed to adjust her elevation down by 1.5 minutes of angle. Coriolis effect. Northern hemisphere, shooting east, add 2 minutes right. Spin drift from the right-hand rifling, add 1 minute right. Total adjustment time, 4 seconds. She breathed in, let half the breath out, found the natural respiratory pause where her lungs were still and her heartbeat was just a distant rhythm. Squeezed the trigger with 3 pounds of pressure, smooth and steady, like Master Gunny Cross had taught her 1,000 times. The rifle bucked. The sound rolled across the valley like thunder. 3.2 seconds later, the first hostile fighter dropped. Rollins was calling targets now, reading the wind, marking the hits. Sarah worked the bolt, chambered the next round, found the next target, breathed, paused, fired, shot, reload, acquire, fire, shot, reload, acquire, fire. The world narrowed to the scope, to the crosshairs, to the mathematics of death delivered at range. This wasn't anger. This wasn't revenge. This was physics, ballistics, the cold, hard science of sending a 750-grain bullet downrange at 2,800 feet per second and making it arrive exactly where it needed to be. By 500 hours, the sun was rising behind her, turning the desert gold and red. By 700, the ambush was broken. The Marines were moving, pushing through the valley, covering each other, professional and efficient. They didn't know why the enemy had suddenly stopped firing, didn't know that someone was watching over them from a ridgeline they couldn't see. By 900, Sarah's ammunition was almost gone. 47 shots fired, 47 hits confirmed. The longest at 1,923 meters, over a mile, shooting uphill into a crosswind that had shifted 3 times during the bullet's 3.8-second flight. The radio crackled. The Marine team leader, a captain named Morrison. "Overwatch, this is ground 1. I don't know who you are up there, but you just saved 8 lives. We owe you." Sarah didn't respond, just watched through her scope as the Marines cleared the valley, secured the village, called in the medevac birds. Her job was done. The mission was over. But something Morrison had said stuck with her, replayed in her mind as she broke down the rifle, as Rollins packed the spotting scope, as they began the long hike back to the extraction point. "I don't know who you are up there." Nobody ever did. That was the point of being Phantom, the ghost on the ridgeline, the guardian angel nobody could see. Master Gunnery Sergeant Daniel Cross had been the same way. 26 years in the Marine Corps, most of it spent behind a rifle scope, protecting Marines who never knew his name. He had taught Sarah that being a scout sniper wasn't about glory, wasn't about medals or recognition or headlines. It was about bringing people home. Every shot you take, he had told her when she was 16, struggling with the moral weight of what he was teaching her, saves 10 Marines who don't have to assault that position. Your job isn't to kill, Sarah. Your job is to protect. She had carried those words with her through 4 deployments, through Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria, and missions she couldn't talk about in countries she couldn't name, through 47 confirmed kills that she remembered in perfect detail, every face, every name when she could learn it, every life that had ended because she had done her job with precision. Master Gunny Cross would have been proud of today. She knew that. Could almost hear his voice in her head, that gravelly rumble that sounded like rocks in a tumbler. "That's my girl. Textbook fundamentals. Breathing, trigger squeeze, follow through. Excellence never changes, Sarah, just gets refined." But Master Gunny Cross wasn't there to tell her that. Because 18 months ago, Master Gunny Cross had died in this same desert, in a different valley, killed by an ambush that someone had arranged. Someone who had sold his position to the enemy. Someone who had taken money to betray the Marines they were supposed to protect. Someone whose name Sarah had been hunting for 18 months. Someone she was finally close to finding. Present day, Camp Pendleton, 2 hours after the slap. Sarah sat in the women's bathroom on the 3rd floor of the admin building, running cold water over her face. The door was supposed to be locked, but she'd heard Colonel Garrett coming from 50 feet away and decided to let him in. The man had been a Marine for 30 years. He'd earned the right to speak his piece. "That was either the bravest or the stupidest thing I've ever seen," Garrett said, leaning against the doorframe. "I'm not sure which." Sarah looked at him in the mirror. Marcus Garrett was 54 years old, with iron gray hair cut high and tight, and eyes that had seen combat in 3 different wars. He was also one of the few people on this base who knew even a fraction of the truth about why she was here. "He hit me first," Sarah said simply. He's a two-star admiral. And I'm a federal official conducting an authorized investigation. Garrett sighed and walked closer. Let me see your face. Sarah turned. The bruise was already forming on her jaw, purple and angry. Her lip had stopped bleeding, but it was swollen and would need attention. You should go to medical, Garrett said. I've had worse. I know you have. That's what worries me. Sarah turned back to the mirror and pressed a wet paper towel against her lip. The cold helped, but not much. The physical pain didn't bother her. She'd endured things that would break most people. Hell Week at Marine combat training, the Scout sniper course where she'd hike 30 miles with a 90-pound pack, and then had to make a 1,000-meter shot with hands shaking from exhaustion. What bothered her was the anger. 18 months of Marine training, 18 months before that of Scout sniper discipline, 4 years before that of learning to control every emotion, every impulse, every natural human reaction. And right now, every instinct she had was screaming at her to go back out there and finish what Harwell had started. To make him pay. Not just for the slap, for everything. For Master Gunny Cross. For the 11 other operators who had died because of intelligence leaks. For the families who deserved answers and justice. He's dirty, Colonel, Sarah said quietly. You know it. I know it. That's why I'm here. Garrett's jaw tightened. I know, but the timeline, the exchange is in 48 hours, Sarah interrupted. Harwell is going to sell classified submarine patrol routes to a Russian operative codenamed Serpent. If that information gets out, every Ohio-class submarine in the Pacific Fleet becomes a target. We're talking about nuclear deterrent capabilities. We're talking about thousands of lives. And you're supposed to observe and report, Garrett said, not engage. That was the mission brief from Naval Intelligence. Sarah's eyes met his in the mirror. Cold, hard, unyielding. He engaged me first, Colonel. Garrett was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, your father would be proud of you. The coldness in Sarah's eyes flickered, just for a second, just enough to show that somewhere beneath the operator, beneath the Scout sniper, beneath the 18 months of hunting a traitor, there was still a daughter who missed her mentor. Master Gunny Cross is dead, Sarah said. Her voice was flat, controlled, but there was something underneath it, something that sounded like broken glass. Because of intelligence leaks, because someone in the military sold information that got his team killed, someone who was supposed to protect them. She turned to face Garrett directly. So no, Colonel, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not standing down. I'm going to find out who's responsible, and I'm going to make sure they pay for what they did. Every single one of them. Garrett nodded slowly. He'd known this was coming. Had known from the moment 18 months ago when a young Marine lieutenant had walked into his office with a file folder full of evidence and eyes that held too much grief and too much determination. What do you need? He asked. Time, access, and for you to keep Harwell busy while I work. He's not going to let this go. He'll come after you. Sarah smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I'm counting on it. Admiral Richard Harwell stood in his office, staring out the window at the parade ground below. His hand was still tingling where she'd grabbed him. That grip, that impossible, inhuman grip. Who the hell was she? He'd pulled her file immediately after the ceremony. Emily Harper, 22 years old, Department of Defense contractor specializing in tactical assessment. Security clearance so high that half her file was redacted. No military service on record, no combat experience. Nothing that explained how a woman who looked like she should be in college could move like that, could look at him like that, could catch his arm mid-swing like she'd done it 1,000 times before. His secure phone rang, the encrypted line that only 3 people had the number to. Harwell's blood pressure spiked as he answered, yes. The voice on the other end was cold, accented, Russian, though the man spoke perfect English. We have a problem. I'm aware, Harwell said. There's a Pentagon observer on base. I know who she is. A pause. The question is whether you can handle her. She's nobody. Some girl they sent to check boxes and write reports. Silence on the other end. Then a sound that might have been a laugh. She caught your arm mid-strike, Richard, in front of 2,000 Marines. Does that sound like nobody to you? Harwell swallowed. The man on the phone, Dmitry Volkov, though that probably wasn't his real name, codename Serpent, had connections that reached into places Harwell didn't want to think about. Russian military intelligence. The kind of people who made problems disappear permanently. What are you suggesting? Harwell asked. I'm suggesting that your casual attitude may have already compromised our arrangement. The exchange happens in 48 hours. If she interferes, she won't, Harwell interrupted. His mind was racing, searching for solutions. Then it came to him. Perfect. Elegant. The kind of plan that would eliminate the problem and cover his tracks at the same time. The Marine Raider assessment, he said slowly. 72 hours of the most brutal evaluation in the military. If I can force her into it, force her? How? I'll file a formal complaint. Insubordination. Assault on a superior officer. I'll give her a choice. Complete the assessment to prove her credentials, or be arrested and removed from base. Another long pause. Then Volkov laughed softly. Clever, Richard, very clever. Either she quits, and most candidates do, or she's too busy surviving to notice anything else. A pause. But be warned, if this fails, there will be consequences. Not just for the operation, for you. The line went dead. Harwell stood in the darkness for a long time thinking. The girl, Emily Harper, if that was even her real name, was dangerous. He could feel it in his bones. Could see it in the way she'd looked at him after catching his arm. Like she was calculating exactly how many different ways she could kill him. But he hadn't survived 32 years in the Navy by backing down from threats. He picked up his phone and dialed Colonel Garrett's office. Colonel, I want that contractor in my office first thing tomorrow morning. We have some things to discuss. Sarah walked back to her temporary quarters as the sun set over Camp Pendleton. The base was settling into its evening rhythm. Marines heading to chow, lights coming on in the barracks, the distant sound of someone running cadence. She'd been assigned a small room in the visiting officers' quarters. Bare walls, government-issue furniture, a narrow bed with sheets so stiff they could probably stand up on their own. But it had a door that locked and a window that faced away from the main road, which was all she needed. Sarah pulled out her encrypted laptop and logged into the secure server that Naval Intelligence had set up for this operation. 18 months of work, hundreds of hours combing through classified files, communication logs, financial records, following the trail of 12 intelligence leaks that had resulted in 47 American deaths, all of it pointing to one man, Rear Admiral Richard Harwell. The evidence was there. Circumstantial, yes, but mounting. Every leak had originated from communications channels that Harwell had access to. Every sale of classified information had coincided with sudden deposits in offshore accounts that clever forensic accounting had traced back to shell corporations connected to Harwell's extended family. But Sarah needed more, needed physical evidence, needed to catch him in the act. That's why she was here. That's why she'd spent 18 months building this cover identity. That's why she'd walked onto that parade ground this morning, knowing exactly what Harwell's reaction would be. Sometimes you had to provoke the enemy to make them reveal themselves. Her phone buzzed. Encrypted text from Commander Rachel Wade, her handler at Naval Intelligence. Harwell confirmed meeting with Serpent. Exchange moved up. Now scheduled for assessment day 3, 1400 hours. Location, Supply Building Charlie. You need to be there. Sarah read the message twice, then deleted it. Day 3. That was the final evolution of the Marine Raider assessment, the live-fire urban combat exercise. She'd be in the middle of the most intense military evaluation in the country while Harwell was selling out his nation 50 yards away. Perfect. She smiled grimly and started doing push-ups on the floor of her quarters. 200, 300. She'd lost count somewhere around 400. Sleep wasn't coming tonight. Too much adrenaline, too many variables, too many ways this mission could go sideways. But that was fine. She'd operated on no sleep before. 72 hours in the Hindu Kush with nothing but MREs and adrenaline. The human body could do remarkable things when properly trained and motivated. And Sarah was highly motivated. She pulled out the dog tags from under her shirt. Master Gunnery Sergeant Daniel J. Cross, USMC. He'd given them to her on her 18th birthday, right before she shipped out to Scout Sniper School. "You've earned these, kid," he'd said, pressing the medal into her palm. "Now go be legendary." Sarah pressed the tags to her lips. The metal was cool, worn smooth from years of handling. "I'm close, Master Gunny," she whispered into the empty room. "So close. 48 hours and Harwell answers for everything. For you, for the others, for all of it." No response, of course. Just the quiet hum of the air conditioning and the distant sounds of the base settling in for the night. But she could almost hear his voice anyway, that gravelly rumble that had guided her through 1,000 training sessions. "Stay cold, Sarah. Stay cold. Stay controlled. Stay compassionate. That's the way." She'd been cold for 18 months, controlled for longer than that. But compassion? That was the hard part. That was the thing she struggled with every single day. Because what she wanted to do to Richard Harwell, what she wanted to do to every person who had betrayed their oath, their Marines, their country for money, that had nothing to do with compassion. That was pure, cold rage. But Master Gunny Cross had taught her better than that. Had taught her that excellence in violence was still violence. That the mark of a true warrior wasn't the ability to kill, but the wisdom to know when killing was necessary and when it wasn't. "Your job is to protect, Sarah," he'd told her once, after she'd made a difficult shot in Afghanistan. A shot that had saved lives but cost her sleep for weeks. Not to punish, not to judge, to protect. Everything else is just noise. Sarah tucked the dog tags back under her shirt and stood up. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests. Harwell would make his move, and she would have to be ready. But tonight she had one more thing to do. She opened her laptop and pulled up the file on Master Gunnery Sergeant Cross's death. Read through it for the 1,000th time. Syria, October 2022. 12-man Marine Force recon team conducting a classified operation. Ambushed 20 kilometers from the Iraqi border. Intelligence leak had given the enemy their exact position, their timeline, their extraction route. 11 men died in that ambush. The 12th, a young corporal named Mitchell Hayes, had survived long enough to be evacuated, but died 2 days later from his wounds. The after-action report had been vague, classified. The families had been told it was combat, enemy contact, the fog of war. But Sarah had access to the real files, the ones that showed communication intercepts, financial transactions, the pattern of betrayal that led straight back to Camp Pendleton, straight back to Rear Admiral Richard Harwell. She closed the file and opened a new one. This one was labeled simply Serpent. Dmitry Volkov, Russian military intelligence, known associate of Harwell for 8 years, broker of classified information, responsible for arranging the sale of everything from troop movements to submarine patrol routes. And according to the intelligence that Commander Wade had just sent her, he would be on this base in 48 hours. Sarah stared at Volkov's photo, memorized every detail, the cold eyes, the thin smile, the hands that had probably killed more people than she had. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered that this was personal, that she'd crossed the line from professional operator to someone seeking revenge. But Sarah had made her peace with that 18 months ago. This wasn't just about justice. This was about making sure that no other Marine died the way Master Gunny Cross had died. betrayed by the very system that was supposed to protect him. If that made her unprofessional, so be it. She closed the laptop and lay back on the narrow bed. Set her alarm for 0430. Tomorrow, Harwell would make his move. Would try to force her into the Marine Raider assessment. Would try to eliminate her as a threat. And Sarah would do exactly what he expected. She would accept the challenge, complete every evolution, break every record if necessary, all while closing the trap on a traitor who had no idea what was coming. Sarah closed her eyes and let sleep take her. But even in sleep, her mind was calculating, planning, preparing for the 72 hours that would change everything. The last thought she had before darkness claimed her was Master Gunny Cross's voice, as clear as if he were standing in the room. "Stay cold, baby girl. Stay cold." The alarm shattered the darkness at 0430 hours. Sarah was already awake, had been for 20 minutes, lying in the narrow bed and running through scenarios in her mind. 48 hours until the exchange. 72 hours of assessment starting in 30 minutes. The timeline was tight, the margins razor thin, but that was fine. She'd operated in worse conditions. She dressed in the PT gear that had been left outside her door sometime during the night. Black shorts, gray Marine Corps t-shirt, running shoes that had seen better days. Not her gear. Probably belonged to some male Marine 3 sizes larger. But regulations required standardized equipment for the assessment. Everyone started equal, at least in theory. Sarah laced the shoes tight and headed out into the California dawn. The staging area was already lit up like a stadium. 15 candidates stood in loose formation, all of them staring at her as she approached. 14 men, all Marines, all with combat deployment patches on their shoulders, and hard eyes that had seen things most people couldn't imagine. They ranged from staff sergeant to gunnery sergeant, ages 25 to 38, every one of them a seasoned combat veteran. And then there was Sarah, 22 years old, 5'3", dressed in borrowed PT gear that hung loose on her frame. She could feel their eyes on her, calculating, dismissing. Some of them smiled. One of them actually laughed. Gunnery Sergeant Jake Brennan emerged from the main building at exactly 0500 hours. 48 years old, Force Recon veteran, built like a tank that had been left out in the weather until it rusted into something harder than steel. His face looked like it had been carved from granite with a dull chisel, and his eyes held all the warmth of a winter storm. "Listen up!" His voice carried across the staging area like a thunderclap. "For the next 72 hours, you belong to me. You will eat when I say eat, sleep when I say sleep, breathe when I say breathe. Anyone who quits will be removed immediately. Anyone who fails will be removed immediately. Anyone who pisses me off will be removed painfully." He walked slowly past the candidates, examining each one like a butcher examining livestock. When he reached Sarah, he stopped. Well, what do we have here?" "Candidate Harper, gunnery sergeant." "Candidate Harper." He said her name like it tasted bad. "I've been doing this job for 22 years. Never once had a female candidate. Never once had a civilian candidate. And now I've got both wrapped up in one pretty little package." Sarah said nothing, just stood at attention, eyes forward, letting his words roll off her like water. Brennan leaned in close. "Let me be clear, Princess. I don't know what strings you pulled to get here. I don't care what important people you know. In my assessment, there are no politics, no special treatment, no mercy. You will be held to the same standard as every Marine on this field. And when you quit, because you will quit, I will personally escort you to the gate." "Understood, gunnery sergeant. Do you have anything to say?" Sarah finally met his eyes. "Just one thing, gunnery sergeant." "What's that?" "I don't quit. Ever." Brennan stared at her for a long moment. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or the faintest hint of respect. Then it was gone, replaced by the mask of professional indifference. "We'll see about that." He turned back to the group. "First evolution, 20-mile forced march, 80-pound pack, 4 hours. Anyone who doesn't make the cutoff is done. He checked his watch. Move out in 5 minutes. The candidates scrambled to gear up. Sarah moved to the equipment station, shouldered her pack, exactly 80 pounds. She could feel it in the way it settled on her frame, and adjusted the straps with practiced efficiency. High on the shoulders, weight distributed evenly, hip belt snug but not too tight. Marine Corps technique, learned from Master Gunny Cross when she was 14 years old. One of the other candidates, a staff sergeant with a chest full of ribbons, sidled up beside her. "You know this is insane, right?" He had a Tennessee drawl and a face like sun-dried leather. "Women aren't built for this kind of punishment." Sarah tightened her final strap. "Then I guess I'd better try to keep up." She walked to the starting line without looking back. The route took them through Camp Pendleton's wilderness training area. 20 miles of hills and ravines and terrain that seemed specifically designed to break the human body. The temperature started at 68 degrees and climbed steadily as the sun rose. By mile 10, it was 96 degrees, and 3 candidates had already dropped out, sprawled on the side of the trail with heat exhaustion, while medics loaded them into Humvees. Sarah started in the middle of the pack, kept her breathing steady, her pace controlled. Watched the other candidates, studied their form, their technique. Some of them were pushing too hard too early, burning energy they'd need for the last 5 miles. Others were pacing themselves well, veterans of forced marches in Afghanistan and Iraq. She could have been at the front from the start, could have pushed the pace, showed everyone what she was capable of. But that wasn't the mission. The mission was to complete the assessment while maintaining her cover, gather intelligence on Harwell, and position herself for the exchange in 48 hours. Besides, Master Gunny Cross had taught her better than to waste energy on showing off. "The rifle doesn't care if you're first or last," he told her once, during a particularly brutal training evolution. "The target doesn't care. All that matters is whether you can perform when it counts. Save your strength for when you need it." By mile 15, 5 more candidates had dropped out. Sarah moved to the front of the pack, not because she was trying to show off now, but because her body had found its rhythm, and holding back was actually harder than pushing forward. Gunnery Sergeant Brennan drove alongside in a Humvee, watching the candidates with cold assessment. Every few minutes his eyes would drift to Sarah, tracking her form, her breathing, the way her pack sat on her shoulders. He was looking for something. Sarah could feel it. Looking for the crack in her armor, the moment when the civilian contractor facade would slip and reveal what she really was. At mile 18, Brennan suddenly called out, "Candidate Harper, halt!" Sarah stopped immediately. The other candidates continued past her, boots pounding on the trail. Brennan exited the Humvee and approached. They were alone now, the other candidates 50 meters ahead and pulling away. "Why are you here?" His voice was low, dangerous. "Really?" "To prove I can meet Marine standards, Gunnery Sergeant." "Bullshit." He stepped closer. "You move like special operations. I've trained Marines for 22 years. I know an operator when I see one. What's your background?" Sarah kept her eyes forward. "Civilian fitness enthusiast, Gunnery Sergeant. My father was Marine Corps. He taught me proper techniques." "What's your father's name?" Sarah paused, just for a second, just long enough to let a crack of truth show through the lie. "I'd prefer not to say, Gunnery Sergeant." Brennan studied her for a long moment. The other candidates were disappearing around a bend in the trail now, their lead growing. Every second she stood here was another second she'd have to make up. "Whoever he was," Brennan finally said, "he taught you right." He gestured toward the trail. "Move out." Sarah took off at a controlled run. The pack bounced on her shoulders, 80 pounds of weight that would have crushed someone who didn't know how to carry it properly. But Master Gunny Cross had taught her to ruck march before she could drive a car, had taken her on 10-mile hikes in the mountains behind Camp Pendleton, adding weight to her pack every month until she could carry 90 pounds without slowing down. She caught the lead candidates by mile 19, passed them at mile 19.5, crossed the finish line at 3 hours and 43 minutes, the second fastest time in Marine Raider assessment history. Brennan was waiting at the finish line with a stopwatch and a face that revealed nothing. "Time," he said flatly, 3 hours, 43 minutes, best female time in the history of this assessment. A pause. "What's the best time overall?" Sarah was breathing hard but controlled. 3 hours, 38 minutes, Gunnery Sergeant, and you just missed it by 5 minutes. Brennan's eyes narrowed. "Who the hell are you, really?" Sarah met his gaze. "I'm just a contractor, Gunnery Sergeant. Didn't you hear?" She walked past him toward the recovery area, leaving Brennan standing there with his stopwatch and his questions. The hand-to-hand combat evaluation began at 1300 hours, after a brief meal and rest period that wasn't nearly long enough. The candidates gathered in the training facility, a converted warehouse with padded mats covering the floor, and the permanent smell of sweat and blood. Each candidate would face 3 opponents, Marine Raider instructors, all of them combat veterans with black belts in multiple martial arts. Full contact, tap out or knockout ended the round. No exceptions. Sarah was called first. Of course she was. Brennan wanted to see her fail early, get it over with, confirm his suspicions that she was just another civilian who had wandered in over her head. Her first opponent was Staff Sergeant Kyle Drummond. 6'2", 215 pounds, with shoulders like a linebacker and hands that looked like they could crush concrete. Former Army Ranger who transferred to the Marines. Former Golden Gloves boxer, 2 combat tours in Afghanistan. The kind of man who'd probably never lost a fight in his life. Vegas odds, if they existed, would have been 20-1 against Sarah. Brennan stood at the edge of the mat. Combat evaluation. 3 rounds. Candidate Harper, you're up. Instructor Drummond. Drummond stepped onto the mat with a smile that was all teeth. "Nothing personal, sweetheart, but this is going to hurt." Sarah said nothing, just settled into her stance. Feet shoulder-width apart, weight balanced, hands loose at her sides. The stance Master Gunny Cross had drilled into her 10,000 times until it was as natural as breathing. "Begin!" Drummond came in fast, throwing a jab-cross combination that would have knocked most people unconscious. Heavy hands, professional technique, the kind of punches that ended fights in one shot. Sarah slipped inside his guard like water flowing through fingers. The movement was so smooth, so effortless, that for a split second Drummond's eyes went wide with surprise. Then her elbow drove into his solar plexus with surgical precision. Drummond doubled over, gasping. Sarah didn't give him time to recover. Knee to the face. His nose exploded blood. Leg sweep that put him on his back. Before he could react, she was on top of him, arm locked around his neck in a textbook rear naked choke. 3 seconds later, Drummond tapped. Total time, 11 seconds. The training facility went absolutely silent. 15 candidates staring, 4 instructors frozen. Even Brennan looked shocked, though he covered it quickly. Sarah stood and walked back to her starting position. Her breathing hadn't changed. Her expression hadn't changed. She looked like she just finished tying her shoes, not dismantling a trained Marine in less time than it takes to pour a cup of coffee. "Next," she said quietly, Brennan sent Sergeant First Class Noah Willis. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, expert grappler, the kind of fighter who could tie you in knots before you knew what was happening. He tried to take Sarah to the ground, use his size and strength advantage. Sarah countered with joint locks that Cross had taught her, wrist control, elbow manipulation, leverage points that turned an opponent's strength against them. 9 seconds later, Willis was tapping. The third opponent was Master Sergeant Caleb Hawthorne, Marine Corps martial arts instructor, the most experienced fighter on the base, 38 years old with 20 years of combat experience. He lasted longer, tried to tire Sarah out, use his endurance and ringcraft. 17 seconds. When it was over, Sarah stood alone on the mat with 3 groaning men scattered around her. She wasn't breathing hard. She wasn't even sweating. She just stood there, waiting for whatever came next. Brennan approached slowly. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" "My father, gunnery sergeant." "Your father must have been one hell of a Marine." Something flickered in Sarah's expression. Pain, loss, love, all of it compressed into a single heartbeat before the mask slammed back down. "He was the best I ever knew, gunnery sergeant." Brennan nodded slowly. After the other candidates had cycled through their evaluations, none of them coming close to Sarah's performance, he pulled her aside. "I called in a favor," he said quietly. "Checked on Pentagon contractors named Emily Harper." Sarah tensed imperceptibly. "Doesn't exist," Brennan continued, "but I did find a Lieutenant Sarah Vaughn, Marine Force Recon, daughter of General William Vaughn, trained by Master Gunnery Sergeant Daniel Cross from age 12. Sarah held his gaze. "No point denying it now." "Danny Cross was my instructor 20 years ago," Brennan said. "Best Marine I ever knew." "When did he die?" 2 years ago, Syria. Intelligence leak." Brennan's face went hard. "I heard about that. 12-man team. Ambushed. They said it was combat." "It was betrayal." Sarah's voice was quiet, but carried an edge like a blade. "Someone sold them out. Someone in this command." "Harwell." It wasn't a question. "What do you need?" Brennan asked. "Day 3, 1,400 hours. I need 20 minutes away from the exercise. The final evolution is live-fire urban combat. If I pull you out, create a distraction, medical emergency, something that pulls all the instructors except you." Brennan studied her for a long moment. His whole career had been built on following orders, respecting the chain of command, trusting the system. And now a 22-year-old woman was asking him to help her take down a 2-star admiral. But he'd served with Danny Cross, had learned from the man, had watched Cross turn raw recruits into scout snipers through patient teaching and unwavering dedication. And if Cross had trained this woman, had believed in her enough to pass on his knowledge, then Brennan would trust that judgment. "Consider it done," he said. "But Lieutenant, if this goes wrong, we're both finished." "It won't go wrong, Gunnery Sergeant." "How can you be sure?" Sarah's smile was cold. "Because I don't quit, ever." The stress inoculation phase began at 0200 hours on day 2. The candidates were isolated in individual cells, hooded, hands zip-tied behind their backs. Industrial noise played at ear-splitting volume through speakers mounted in the ceiling. Interrogation sessions every 2 hours. Sensory deprivation, sleep deprivation, psychological pressure designed to break even the strongest minds. By hour 6, 4 more candidates had quit. Only 6 remained. Sarah sat in her cell with the hood over her head, counting seconds, controlling her breathing, letting the noise wash over her without penetrating. This wasn't the first time she'd been through stress inoculation. BUD/S had been worse. The interrogation resistance training that all scout snipers underwent had been worse. This was just 72 hours of discomfort. She'd survived worse on a Tuesday. At hour 8, the door to her cell opened. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate. The hood was removed, and light flooded her vision. Admiral Richard Harwell stood in front of her. Sarah blinked against the sudden brightness, letting her eyes adjust. They were alone. The interrogators had left. This wasn't protocol. Candidates weren't supposed to have contact with anyone outside the assessment cadre during stress inoculation. But Harwell didn't care about protocol, that much was clear. "Miss Harper," he said, circling her chair like a shark. "Or is that even your real name?" Sarah kept her face blank. "Emily Harper, Department of Defense contractor." "I pulled your file. Very thin, almost like it was fabricated." Sarah said nothing. "I know you're not DOD," Harwell continued. "The question is, who sent you? CIA? DIA? Naval Intelligence?" "I don't know what you mean, Admiral." Harwell leaned close. She could smell his cologne, expensive and cloying, could see the vein pulsing in his temple, could count the heartbeats in his neck, could calculate with the part of her brain that was always calculating exactly how long it would take to break his trachea with her forehead from this angle. 3 seconds. Maybe 4 if he tried to pull away. "Let me tell you something interesting," Harwell said. "You arrived at Camp Pendleton exactly 18 months after a certain Master Gunnery Sergeant died in Syria." Sarah's micro-expression flickered, just for a fraction of a second, but Harwell caught it. She saw the triumph in his eyes. "Daniel Cross," he continued, "legendary scout sniper, 26 years Marine Corps, died in an ambush, October 2022. Intelligence leak, they said. Someone sold his team's position to the enemy." Every muscle in Sarah's body was screaming at her to move, to attack, to make him pay for saying Cross's name with that smug smile on his face. But she stayed still, breathed, counted backwards from 10. Stay cold, stay controlled, stay compassionate. "Tragic, really," Harwell said. "All those Marines dying because someone betrayed them. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you, Miss Harper?" "I'm a contractor, Admiral. I don't have access to operational intelligence." "Of course not," Harwell smiled. "Just a coincidence you're here, asking questions, poking around." He walked to the door, then paused. "Oh, and Miss Harper? Tomorrow's live fire exercise? Accidents happen. You should be very careful." The door closed. The hood went back on. Sarah was alone in the darkness with the industrial noise and her racing thoughts. He knew, maybe not everything, but enough. Enough to be dangerous. Enough to accelerate his timeline, take action, eliminate the threat before it could eliminate him. Which meant the next 24 hours were going to be even more dangerous than she'd anticipated. But that was fine. Sarah had spent 18 months preparing for this, had spent 4 years before that becoming someone who could handle danger, had spent her entire life learning from a man who had faced down worse odds and survived. Until he hadn't. Until someone like Harwell had sold him out for money. For the first time in 18 months, Sarah felt the rage threaten to break through her control, felt her hands shake with the desire to hurt someone, to make Harwell pay not just with prison time, but with pain. Master Gunny Cross's voice cut through the darkness like a knife. "Stay cold, Sarah. Stay cold." Sarah forced her breathing to slow, counted backwards from 100. By 50, her hands had stopped shaking. By 20, her heartbeat was back to normal. By 0, she was calm again. Cold, controlled, ready. At hour 12, Brennan entered her cell under the pretense of a bathroom break. Instead, he led her to an empty office and gave her 5 minutes. "I didn't see you," he said. "You were never here." Sarah used the time to access Harwell's digital communications through a back door that Naval Intelligence had installed months ago. Found what she was looking for, an encrypted email confirming the exchange. "Tomorrow, 1400 hours, Supply Building Charlie, Ohio-class submarine patrol routes, $5 million. She committed every detail to memory, then let Brennan lead her back to her cell. "Master Gunny Cross was investigating Harwell when he died, wasn't he?" Brennan asked quietly. "Yes. And you're finishing what he started?" "Yes," Brennan nodded. "What do you need tomorrow?" "Exactly what we discussed. A distraction at 1300 hours, 20 minutes, that's all." "You'll have it," he paused. "Be careful, Lieutenant. These people play for keeps." "So do I, Gunnery Sergeant." The final evolution began at 0800 on day 3. Live fire urban combat exercise in a mock village 2 kilometers from Supply Building Charlie. 6 candidates remaining, split into 2 teams, attackers and defenders. Live ammunition, real stakes. Sarah was assigned to the attacking team along with 2 other candidates, a gunnery sergeant named Collins and a staff sergeant named Ramirez. Both combat veterans, both looking at her with a mixture of respect and wariness after watching her performance over the last 2 days. The scenario briefing was simple. Attackers had to secure a high-value target being held in the center of the village. Defenders had to prevent the capture. Exercise would run from 800 to 1,500 hours, with instructors observing and grading every movement. But Sarah knew something the others didn't. At 1,400 hours, while they were in the middle of the exercise, Admiral Richard Harwell would be meeting with Dmitry Volkov at Supply Building Charlie, 2 kilometers away, trading classified submarine routes for $5 million, completing a transaction that had cost 47 American lives over 8 years. And Sarah was going to stop it. The exercise began with simulated artillery, smoke grenades, blank rounds cracking through the air. The attacking team advanced through the village using proper cover and movement techniques, clearing buildings, calling out contacts. Sarah moved with them, playing her role, but her mind was tracking time. 900, 1,000, 1,100. At 1,300 hours, Brennan's voice crackled over the radio. All instructors, medical emergency. Candidate down, grid 445, 223, respond immediately. Every instructor except Brennan converged on the fake emergency. The exercise descended into controlled chaos. Sarah used the distraction to slip away from her team, moving through the village perimeter and into the wilderness beyond. She ran. 2 kilometers through ravines, moving fast but controlled, rifles slung across her back. Her entire focus narrowed to a single point. Supply Building Charlie. She arrived at 1,350 hours, 10 minutes early. Perfect. The building was isolated, surrounded by scrub brush and chain-link fence. Through a window, Sarah could see 2 men. Harwell, in his service khakis, looking nervous, and a man Sarah recognized from intelligence photos, Dmitry Volkov. Tall, lean, cold eyes. Serpent. Sarah moved closer, staying low, using the terrain for cover. Close enough to hear voices through the cracked window. Ohio-class submarine patrol routes, Harwell was saying. Pacific Fleet, 6 months of data, everything you asked for. And the payment? Volkov's English was perfect, barely accented. 5 million, half now, half on delivery confirmation. Agreed. Volkov reached into his jacket. What about the girl, the one you struck? She's dead by 1,500. Training accident. My associate is handling it. Your associate is sloppy. I should have handled her myself. Sarah's blood ran cold. Associate. Singular. Someone else on this base working with Harwell. Someone she hadn't identified yet. But there was no time to process that information because Sarah was already moving, already kicking the door open, already raising her Sig Sauer M18 and shouting, "Admiral Richard Harwell, you're under arrest for espionage and treason." Both men froze. Then everything happened at once. Volkov's hand came out of his jacket with a pistol. Sarah dove right as he fired, 3 rounds punching through the doorframe where her head had been. She rolled, came up firing. 2 shots. Volkov's shoulder, his gun hand. The pistol clattered to the floor. Volkov charged impossibly fast, a knife suddenly appearing in his other hand. Sarah blocked the first slash with her forearm, felt the blade bite through her sleeve and draw blood. Twisted, used his momentum against him, broke his wrist with a joint lock that Master Gunny Cross had taught her when she was 16. The knife fell. Volkov kicked it away, then came at her with his good hand, trying to use his size and strength advantage. They grappled, crashed into a metal shelf, fell together in a shower of supplies. Sarah got her knee on his throat. Her M18 pressed against his temple. "Don't move," she gasped. Blood was running down her arm from the knife cut. Volkov smiled through the pain, blood on his teeth. "I know you, Danny Cross's little protege." Sarah's finger tightened on the trigger. "You sold him out. Syria, October 2022. I sold the intel. Harwell provided it. Your mentor walked right into the trap." Volkov's smile widened. 12 Marines, dead because someone they trusted betrayed them. Sarah was shaking, not from fear, from rage. Pure, incandescent rage that threatened to burn through 18 months of discipline and training. "So kill me," Volkov said. "Prove you're just like me." Master Gunny Cross's voice cut through the red haze. "Excellence in violence is still violence. Excellence in protection is heroism." Sarah lowered the gun slightly, just slightly. "I'm not like you. You're going to face a military tribunal. Every family you destroyed will see justice." Volkov's smile faded, weak, just like Cross. The door burst open. Brennan and 4 military police officers, weapons drawn. "Lieutenant Vaughn," Brennan called. "Step back." Sarah stood slowly, keeping her gun trained on Volkov, until the MPs secured him. Only then did she lower her weapon. "Where's Harwell?" she asked. "Apprehended 200 meters from here," one of the MPs reported. "Tried to run. Gunnery Sergeant Brennan had him in custody within 90 seconds. Sarah looked at Brennan. The big Marine was holding an evidence bag containing a USB drive. "Submarine routes," Brennan said. "All of it, enough to put him away for life." Sarah nodded. Then the adrenaline crash hit her all at once. Her legs went weak. The room tilted. She would have fallen if Brennan hadn't caught her. "Easy, Lieutenant. You're bleeding." Sarah looked down at her arm. The knife cut was deeper than she'd thought, blood soaking through her sleeve. "I'm fine," she said automatically. "You're going to medical," Brennan said. "That's an order." The medic stitched Sarah's arm in the back of an ambulance while military police processed the scene. 8 stitches. Not bad, considering. She'd had worse in training. Colonel Garrett arrived, his face grim but satisfied. "We got him," he said simply. "Harwell and Volkov both in custody. The USB drive has everything. Submarine routes, communication protocols, patrol schedules. 8 years of treason, all documented." "There's someone else," Sarah said. Volkov mentioned an associate, someone on base working with Harwell. Garrett's expression darkened. "We'll find them. Naval intelligence is already scrubbing communications logs." "What about the families?" Sarah asked quietly. "The 47 operators who died. Do they get told?" "They'll get the truth," Garrett promised. "All of it, starting with Master Gunnery Sergeant Cross's family." Sarah closed her eyes, felt the weight of 18 months lifting off her shoulders, felt something else settling in its place. Not satisfaction, not relief, just a hollow kind of completion. "You did it," Brennan said, appearing beside the ambulance. 18 months. You got him." "It doesn't bring them back," Sarah said. "Doesn't bring Master Gunny Cross back." "No," Brennan agreed, "but it honors them, and that matters." Sarah sat in the back of the ambulance for a long time, holding the dog tags that hung around her neck. "Master Gunnery Sergeant Daniel J. Cross, USMC. Mission complete, Master Gunny," she whispered. "Harwell's going to prison. Volkov too. You can rest now." But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't over. Not really. There was still an associate out there, still questions unanswered, still work to be done. But for now, for this moment, it was enough to know that justice had been served, that the man who had betrayed 47 American operators would answer for his crimes, that Master Gunny Cross had not died in vain. Sarah looked up at the California sky, clear and blue and infinite. Somewhere up there she liked to think Cross was watching, hoping he was proud, hoping he understood that everything she had done, the 18 months of investigation, the 72 hours of hell, the confrontation with Volkov, all of it had been to honor the man who had taught her everything that mattered, the man who had taught her to stay cold, to stay controlled, to stay compassionate, even when every instinct screamed for revenge. The sun was setting over Camp Pendleton, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Sarah closed her eyes and let herself feel, for the first time in 18 months, something other than cold determination. She felt grief. For Master Gunny Cross, for the 46 other operators, for the families left behind. She felt anger at the betrayal, at the waste, at the corruption that had rotted the system from within. But most of all, she felt purpose, because this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. Tomorrow there would be an assembly, an announcement, the truth revealed to 2,000 Marines who had watched Harwell strike her 3 days ago. Tomorrow she would stand before them and explain what had really happened. Tomorrow she would begin the next chapter of her mission. But tonight, Sarah Vaughn allowed herself to rest, to heal, to remember the man who had made her who she was, and to promise him one more time that his legacy would live on. Not through revenge, not through violence, through teaching, through passing on the knowledge, through making sure that no other operator ever died the way he had died, through excellence, the kind of excellence that didn't need to announce itself, the kind that just existed and multiplied and changed the world one Marine at a time. Sarah opened her eyes and looked at Brennan. "Tomorrow," she said, "I need to address the base." "Colonel Garrett already arranged it," Brennan replied. 0900, full formation, every Marine at Pendleton. Sarah nodded. "Good. They deserve the truth. They deserve to know who you really are. Then I guess it's time to stop hiding." Brennan extended his hand. Sarah shook it, felt the calluses, the strength, the respect of a man who had served with legends and recognized one when he saw her. "Your father would be proud," Brennan said. "Both of them." Sarah smiled, a real smile this time, not the cold mask she'd worn for 18 months, but something genuine, something human. "I hope so, Gunnery Sergeant. I really do." The morning sun was already hot when 2,000 Marines assembled on the parade ground at Camp Pendleton, the same parade ground where, 72 hours earlier, Rear Admiral Richard Harwell had struck a young woman he believed to be a civilian contractor. The same parade ground where that woman had caught his second attempt mid-swing and walked away with blood dripping from her chin and eyes that held nothing but cold calculation. Now those same 2,000 Marines stood at attention, waiting. The word had spread through the base like wildfire. Harwell arrested. A Russian operative in custody. Something about espionage, treason, intelligence leaks, but the details were classified. The rumors wild, and nobody knew for certain what had really happened. They were about to find out. Colonel Marcus Garrett stood at the reviewing stand, flanked by 3 officers from Naval Criminal Investigative Service. Behind them, a screen displayed the official Marine Corps insignia. To the right, barely visible in the shadows, stood Rear Admiral Richard Harwell in handcuffs, 2 military police officers holding him in place. Sarah Vaughn stood backstage in the admin building, watching through a window. She'd changed out of the blood-stained utilities from yesterday's confrontation. Now she wore her Marine Corps dress blues for the first time in 18 months. The uniform she'd been forbidden to wear while undercover. The uniform that carried the weight of 4 combat deployments and 47 confirmed kills, and a mission that had finally reached its conclusion. Almost reached its conclusion. There was still one piece missing. The associate that Volkov had mentioned. But naval intelligence was working on that. For now, Sarah had a different mission. She had to tell the truth. Gunnery Sergeant Jake Brennan appeared beside her, also in dress blues, the creases sharp enough to cut paper. "You ready for this, Lieutenant?" Sarah touched the dog tags under her shirt. Master Gunnery Sergeant Daniel J. Cross. They were warm from her body heat. "I've been ready for 2 years. "Your father just arrived," Brennan said. "General Vaughn. He's waiting in the VIP section." Sarah's breath caught. She hadn't seen her father since going undercover, hadn't been able to risk contact, couldn't compromise the mission. For 18 months, General William Vaughn had known his daughter was alive only through encrypted status reports from naval intelligence. "Is he angry?" Sarah asked. "He's proud," Brennan paused, "and scared, the way any father would be when his daughter does something this dangerous." Sarah nodded. She'd deal with that later. Right now, 2,000 Marines were waiting. Colonel Garrett's voice boomed across the parade ground. Marines of Camp Pendleton, 3 days ago, on this exact parade ground, you witnessed Rear Admiral Richard Harwell strike a woman. Most of you did nothing. You followed orders. You respected rank. You trusted the chain of command. Garrett paused, letting the words sink in. What you didn't know is that the woman Admiral Harwell struck was not a Department of Defense contractor. Her name is not Emily Harper. That was a cover identity created by naval intelligence. The formation rippled with surprise. 2,000 heads trying not to turn, trying to maintain discipline. But the shock was visible in shoulders tensing, feet shifting. That woman, Garrett continued, is Lieutenant Sarah Vaughn, United States Marine Corps, Force Recon, Scout Sniper, call sign, Phantom. Now the murmurs couldn't be contained. Phantom. The name was legend in Marine circles. The sniper in Syria who'd made 47 kills in 5 hours. The operator in Afghanistan who'd held off 200 Taliban with nothing but a rifle and the will to protect her team. Stories that most Marines assumed were exaggerated, the way all combat stories get exaggerated in the retelling. But they weren't exaggerated. They were real. And the woman who'd accomplished those impossible things had been standing on this parade ground 3 days ago, while an admiral slapped her and called her a little girl playing soldier. Lieutenant Vaughn was working undercover, Garrett said, investigating Admiral Harwell for espionage. Yesterday, she arrested Harwell and his accomplice, a Russian intelligence operative named Dmitry Volkov. The screen behind Garrett came to life. Photos appeared, Harwell in handcuffs, Volkov being loaded into an armored transport. The USB drive containing classified submarine routes. Documentation of 8 years of intelligence leaks. The charges, Garrett continued, his voice hard as iron, are as follows. 8 years of selling classified intelligence to foreign powers, 12 separate leaks, 47 American operators killed as direct result of information Admiral Harwell sold. Garrett let that number hang in the air. 47. Not an abstract statistic. 47 human beings. 47 Marines and SEALs and Army Rangers who had trusted their leadership and died because that trust was betrayed. Among the dead, Garrett said quietly, was Master Gunnery Sergeant Daniel J. Cross, United States Marine Corps, Scout Sniper, 26 years of service. He died in Syria, October 2022, when his team's position was sold to enemy forces. A photo appeared on the screen. Master Gunny Cross in dress blues, chest covered in ribbons, eyes that looked like they'd seen everything and still found reasons to smile. Master Gunnery Sergeant Cross was Lieutenant Vaughn's mentor. He trained her from age 12, taught her everything he knew about being a scout sniper, believed in her when most people said women couldn't do this job. Sarah stood backstage, staring at Cross's photo on the screen, and felt her throat tighten. She'd seen that photo 1,000 times, had it on her phone, in her wallet, taped to the inside of her footlocker. But seeing it blown up on a screen in front of 2,000 Marines, seeing the man who'd shaped her life honored publicly, was almost more than she could bear. Lieutenant Vaughn has requested to address this formation, Garrett said. I have granted that request. He turned toward the wings. Lieutenant Vaughn, front and center. Sarah walked out into the California sun. 2,000 pairs of eyes tracked her movement. She could feel their assessment, their curiosity, their lingering doubt. The uniform helped. The ribbons on her chest helped. The Purple Heart and Navy Cross that she'd earned in 4 deployments. But she knew that for some of them, she would always be the woman who got slapped 3 days ago. The woman who looked too young, too small, too female to be what she claimed. That was fine. She didn't need their belief. She just needed to tell them the truth. Sarah came to attention at the podium, rendered a proper salute to the formation. They returned it as one, 2,000 hands moving in perfect synchronization. Then she spoke. Marines, 3 days ago, Admiral Harwell struck me on this parade ground. I was in civilian clothes. I looked like I didn't belong. Most of you probably agreed with him. Silence. Absolute and complete. You did nothing wrong. You followed protocol. You respected the chain of command. You trusted that the system would work. That's what makes you Marines. That discipline. That trust. Sarah's hands gripped the edges of the podium. But I want you to remember something. Master Gunnery Sergeant Daniel Cross died 2 years ago because someone in a uniform he trusted, someone with rank and medals and authority, sold him out for money. She could see faces in the formation now. Young Marines, some of them barely 20 years old salts with 20 years in, who'd served with Cross, who remembered him. For 2 years, his family had no answers. For 2 years, they were told it was classified. Operational security, need to know. Sarah's voice hardened. They deserve the truth, and now they have it. She paused, gathering herself. I'm not here to lecture you about gender. I don't care if you think women belong in combat. My performance speaks for itself. 47 confirmed kills, 4 combat deployments, 3 years as an instructor at Scout Sniper School. The formation was absolutely still. Even the wind seemed to have stopped. I'm here because Master Gunny Cross spent his life teaching Marines, including me, that excellence is the only argument that matters. Not rank, not politics, not who you know. Excellence. Sarah's eyes swept across the formation. Master Gunny Cross taught me to shoot when I was 12 years old. He didn't care that I was a girl. He cared that I was willing to work. 10,000 hours on the range. 10,000 repetitions of the fundamentals. By 18, I was a scout sniper. Not because I was talented, because I was taught. She took a breath. And now it's my turn to teach, to pass on what he gave me, to make sure that his knowledge, his expertise, his dedication to excellence doesn't die with him. Sarah's voice softened slightly. To the young Marines watching this, question authority when it's wrong. Respect rank, but verify integrity. Follow orders, but never blindly. The uniform means nothing if the person wearing it has no honor. She looked directly at where Harwell stood in handcuffs. Master Gunnery Sergeant Cross wore this uniform with honor for 26 years. Admiral Harwell wore it as a disguise. Know the difference. Sarah stepped back from the podium, saluted the formation one final time. Semper Fidelis. The response came from 2,000 throats. Semper Fi. Then something unexpected happened. Gunnery Sergeant Brennan started clapping. Slow at first, then faster. Within seconds, the entire formation had broken protocol. 2,000 Marines applauding in violation of every regulation about conduct in formation. But Colonel Garrett didn't stop them. He was clapping too. Sarah stood at attention, fighting back tears as the ovation rolled across the parade ground like thunder. This wasn't for her. This was for Master Gunny Cross, for the truth finally being told, for justice finally being served. When the applause finally died down, Sarah turned to leave the stage. But before she could take a step, a figure appeared from the VIP section. General William Vaughn, 68 years old, 3 stars on his shoulders, a career spanning 40 years in 3 wars, Sarah's father. He walked across the stage with the measured pace of a man who'd led Marines into combat more times than he could count. When he reached Sarah, he didn't salute, didn't shake her hand. He embraced her. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart, he whispered into her hair. Danny would be too. Hell, he is. Wherever he is, he's watching, and he's proud. Sarah let herself cry then. Not the cold tears of grief she'd shed alone in the darkness, but tears of release, of completion, of a daughter finally coming home to her father after 18 months of danger and deception. The formation watched in silence as 3-star General held his daughter and let her be human for the first time since this mission began. 2 weeks later, Sarah stood in a conference room at Marine Corps headquarters in Quantico, Virginia. The walls were covered in citations and awards, photos of Marines in dress blues receiving medals from presidents and generals. Soon her photo would be among them. The ceremony was small, private, classified. Only a handful of people attended. General Vaughn, Colonel Garrett, Gunnery Sergeant Brennan, Commander Rachel Wade from Naval Intelligence, and 3 officers from the Department of Defense. The citation was read aloud by a 2-star general Sarah had never met. For extraordinary heroism and dedication to duty, Lieutenant Sarah Vaughn, while operating undercover in an extended intelligence operation, successfully identified and apprehended a high-ranking military officer engaged in espionage. Through exceptional tactical skills and unwavering determination, Lieutenant Vaughn prevented the compromise of critical national security assets and brought to justice individuals responsible for the deaths of 47 American service members. The general pinned the Navy Cross to Sarah's dress blues, second highest combat decoration in the United States military. The ribbon was blue and white, the medal heavy on her chest. Additionally, the general continued, for actions in Syria resulting in 47 enemy combatants killed in defense of friendly forces, Lieutenant Vaughn is awarded a second Navy Cross. 2 Navy Crosses. At age 22, the youngest female Marine to ever receive the decoration. General Vaughn stepped forward to pin the second medal personally. His hands shook slightly as he attached it to his daughter's uniform. "Your mother would be so proud," he whispered. "She's watching, too. Both of them are watching." Sarah's mother had died when Sarah was 8. Cancer, swift and brutal. Master Gunny Cross had stepped in afterward, become a second father figure, taught Sarah that grief could be channeled into purpose. The ceremony concluded. Photos were taken for official records that would remain classified for decades. Then everyone filed out, leaving Sarah alone with Gunnery Sergeant Brennan. "I have someone who wants to meet you," Brennan said. He opened the door. A young woman stepped in, 19 years old, blonde hair pulled back in a regulation bun, nervous eyes that kept darting between Sarah and Brennan. "Lieutenant Vaughn," Brennan said formally, "this is Private First Class Caitlin Brennan, my daughter." Sarah studied the girl, saw the determination in her stance, the way she held herself like she was ready to prove something. "Ma'am," Caitlin said, voice tight with nerves, "I enlisted because of you. When I heard what you did, catching Harwell, the Syria mission, all of it, I knew women could be real Marines. Not support, not admin, real combat Marines." Sarah glanced at Brennan. The big Marine's face was carefully neutral, but she could see the pride in his eyes. "Have you considered Scout Sniper School?" Sarah asked. Caitlin's eyes widened. "I don't know if I'm good enough, ma'am. Neither did I at 18, but Master Gunny Cross taught me something. You don't need to be good enough. You need to be willing to become good enough." Sarah looked at Brennan. "Gunnery Sergeant, can I borrow your daughter for the summer?" Brennan's face split into a rare smile. "I was hoping you'd ask, ma'am." 6 months passed like water through fingers. Sarah returned to active duty with Marine Force Recon, but with a new assignment. Primary instructor at Scout Sniper School, Camp Pendleton. The same school where Master Gunny Cross had taught for 15 years. The same ranges where he'd trained hundreds of Marines in the art of precision shooting. Now it was Sarah's turn. The first class had 16 students, 12 men, 4 women. Mix of ranks from Lance Corporal to Staff Sergeant. All volunteers, all qualified marksmen, all hungry to learn. Caitlin Brennan was among them, the youngest at 19, the most determined. Week 1 began with fundamentals on the 800-meter range. Sarah stood behind the firing line, watching her students, seeing the mistakes before they made them. One of the male students, a cocky Lance Corporal named Mitchell, was talking big. "Ma'am, I can hit that target with my eyes closed." Sarah walked over slowly. "Then hit it with them open first, Lance Corporal." Mitchell settled into position, fired. The round impacted 6 inches left of center. Wind got it, Mitchell said immediately. It wasn't the wind. It was your breathing. You held your breath. Watch. Sarah dropped into prone position beside him. The M40A6 rifle felt like an extension of her body after 10 years of practice. She went through the process slowly, narrating each step so the students could learn. Natural shooting position, bipod stable, cheek weld consistent, sight picture, crosshairs, center mass. Now watch my breathing. She inhaled slowly, exhaled, inhaled again halfway, then stopped at the natural respiratory pause, that moment between breaths where the body is absolutely still. This is where you shoot, not holding your breath, not after exhaling completely, the natural pause. Your body wants to be here, no tension, no strain. Her finger applied 3 pounds of pressure to the trigger, smooth, steady. The rifle bucked. 3.2 seconds later, the spotter called the hit. Dead center, ma'am. Sarah stood, offered her hand to Mitchell. Again, but this time, feel the pause. Don't force it. Mitchell fired again, this time following Sarah's instruction, finding the natural respiratory pause. The round impacted within 2 inches of center. See, Sarah said, you didn't get better, you got more discipline. Fundamentals beat talent, every single time. By week 8, the students had progressed to advanced ballistics. Sarah stood in a classroom with a whiteboard covered in equations that looked like a physics professor's fever dream. The Earth rotates at 1,000 miles per hour at the equator, she explained, drawing a diagram. When you fire a bullet that's in flight for 3 seconds at 2,000 meters, the Earth has moved underneath it. You're not shooting at where the target is. You're shooting at where it will be. A student raised his hand. Staff Sergeant Rivera, veteran of 2 deployments, skeptical by nature. So we're not shooters, ma'am. We're physicists? Exactly, Staff Sergeant. You're a physicist who happens to hold a rifle. The mathematics don't care about your rank. Physics doesn't care about your experience. The only thing that matters is whether you can calculate correctly and execute precisely. She turned back to the board, wrote out the formula for Coriolis effect. Northern hemisphere, shooting east, the target appears to drift right. Why? Because while your bullet is in flight, the Earth has rotated east underneath it. At 2,000 meters, that's approximately 2 minutes of angle. You must adjust right to compensate. For the next hour, Sarah walked them through every variable that affected long-range shooting. Wind drift, temperature effects, altitude, humidity, barometric pressure, the subtle influence of the Coriolis effect in spin drift. This isn't guesswork, she said. This isn't instinct. This is mathematics. Learn the formulas. Practice the calculations. 10,000 repetitions until it becomes automatic. Week 16 brought the final test, the 2,000-meter shot. The entire class assembled on the range at 0600 hours. The target was a 24-inch steel plate, so far away it was barely visible even through spotting scopes. 2,000 meters, 2,187 yards, 1.24 miles. The conditions were brutal. Temperature already climbing toward 100 degrees. Wind gusting between 12 and 18 miles per hour from the southwest. Mirage effects severe, heat waves distorting the view through the scope. Historically, the success rate for this shot was 40%. Most students failed. Those who passed usually needed multiple attempts. Sarah intended to change that statistic. Gather around, she told the class. I'm going to demonstrate, then you'll each attempt. Watch carefully. Every variable matters. She settled into position behind her rifle. The M40A6 that had accompanied her through 4 deployments, through Syria and Afghanistan, and missions she couldn't talk about. The rifle felt like home. Environmental conditions, Sarah narrated. Temperature, 102 Fahrenheit. Extreme heat means thinner air, faster bullet velocity. Adjust elevation down 0.5 MOA. Wind, 12 miles per hour, gusting to 18, from southwest. That's a quartering wind, requires correction. Her hands moved across the scope, making adjustments with the precision of a surgeon. Range, 2,000 meters exactly. Bullet drop at this range is 640 inches. That's 53 feet, the height of a 5-story building. Your bullet will fall 5 stories before it reaches the target. The students watched, mesmerized, as Sarah continued the calculations. Coriolis effect. Northern hemisphere shooting east, +2 MOA right. Spin drift from right-hand rifling, +1 MOA. Wind drift, calculated at 14 inches right at this temperature and range. Mirage correction. The heat waves visible through the scope mean I must aim slightly under the apparent target position. She finished the calculations. 96 clicks up, 9 clicks right. Total adjustment time, 4 seconds. With practice, you'll do it in 2. Sarah settled behind the rifle, found her breathing rhythm, inhaled, exhaled, inhaled halfway, found the natural pause, squeezed. The rifle thundered. The bullet left the barrel at 2,800 feet per second, spinning through the air at over 200,000 revolutions per minute. For 3.2 seconds, everyone held their breath. Then Gunnery Sergeant Brennan, serving as spotter, called out, "Hit! Dead center!" The class erupted in applause. Sarah stood, brushed dust off her utilities. That wasn't magic. That was mathematics. That was 10,000 hours of practice. That was Master Gunnery Sergeant Daniel Cross teaching me the fundamentals when I was 12 years old and drilling them into me until they became automatic. She looked at each student in turn. And now you're at hour 1. You have 9,999 to go. Who's first? Caitlin Brennan stepped forward, hands trembling slightly, face set with determination. Sarah knelt beside her. What did Master Gunny Cross tell me when I was 17 and scared? What, ma'am? The rifle doesn't know you're nervous. The target doesn't care. Physics is physics. Trust your training. Caitlin nodded, settled into position, began her calculations, working through each variable with methodical precision. It took her 2 minutes, slower than Sarah but thorough, accurate. She made her adjustments, breathed, found the pause, fired. 3.1 seconds. Hit, Brennan called. 6 inches right of center. The class erupted again. Caitlin sat up, eyes wide with disbelief. Sarah pulled her into a hug. Textbook, absolutely textbook. Well done, Private. By the end of the day, 11 out of 16 students had made the shot. 69% success rate, the highest in Scout Sniper School history. All 4 women hit on their first attempt, 100%. Sarah addressed the class as the sun set over Camp Pendleton, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. You just proved something today, not about gender, about training. You were taught correctly, you practiced correctly, you performed correctly. That's the Marine Corps way. That's Master Gunnery Sergeant Cross's legacy. She paused. Excellence doesn't need to announce itself. It just needs to exist. And when you share it, when you teach it to the next generation, it multiplies. 24 weeks after the first class began, all 16 students graduated. 100% completion rate, something that had never happened before in the school's history. The ceremony was held on a crisp October morning, 2 years to the day after Master Gunny Cross had died in Syria. General William Vaughn presided, standing at the podium in his dress blues, 3 stars gleaming on his shoulders. These 16 Marines represent the future of Scout Sniper, he said. They learn from the youngest instructor in this program's history, Lieutenant Sarah Vaughn, 47 combat kills, 2 Navy crosses, and more importantly, a teacher. He paused, looking directly at his daughter. Like her mentor, Master Gunnery Sergeant Daniel Cross, she understands that skills die with you unless you pass them on. That excellence isn't about personal achievement. It's about creating a legacy that outlives you. One by one, The students crossed the stage to receive their Scout Sniper badge. When Caitlin Brennan's name was called, announced as honor graduate with the highest scores in every category, Sarah pinned the badge personally. "Master Gunny Cross would have loved teaching you," Sarah whispered. "He's watching. Make him proud." "I will, ma'am. I promise." After the ceremony, after the photos and congratulations, Sarah drove alone to the Marine Corps Base Cemetery, found the headstones she'd visited dozens of times over the past 2 years. Master Gunnery Sergeant Daniel J. Cross, USMC, 1976 to 2022. Semper Fidelis. Sarah knelt in the grass, placed her Scout Sniper Instructor badge on the headstone. 127 students now, Master Gunny, 31 of them women, every one of them carrying forward what you taught me. She touched the cold granite. Harwell got life in prison, no parole, dishonorably discharged. Volkov got 40 years. The families finally have answers, finally have justice. The wind rustled through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a rifle range was active, the familiar crack of precision shooting. But you know what I'm most proud of? Not catching Harwell, not the medals, not even the 47 kills in Syria, Sarah smiled. Teaching, passing on what you gave me. That's the real victory. That's the real legacy. She stood, rendered a final salute. Mission complete, Master Gunny. Rest easy. 18 months later, Sarah found herself back in combat. Afghanistan, a joint SEAL Marine operation that had gone sideways fast. She was in overwatch position, 1,400 meters from an objective that had turned into a firefight. 8 operators pinned down by 60 hostiles. Bad odds, bad terrain, bad day. Sarah settled behind her rifle, began the familiar calculations. Wind, temperature, range, all the variables that she'd taught to 184 students over the past 2 years. The first shot dropped a hostile trying to flank the pinned operators. The second took out a machine gunner. The third, fourth, fifth, each one precise, calculated, necessary. 32 shots, 32 hits. The operators extracted safely. 0 friendly casualties. But as Sarah broke down her rifle and prepared for extraction, she realized something had changed. She wasn't counting kills anymore, wasn't keeping score, wasn't trying to prove anything. She was counting the Marines who made it home. That was the difference between a shooter and a protector. Master Gunny Cross had understood that. Now finally, so did she. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood in her office at Scout Sniper School, reviewing applications for the next class. 22 students, 8 women. The numbers kept growing. A knock on the door. Caitlin Brennan entered, now a corporal, wearing the Scout Sniper badge with visible pride. "Ma'am, I just got back from Iraq. How was it?" "Scary, but I remembered what you taught. Fundamentals. Breathing. Physics doesn't care if I'm scared." Sarah smiled. "How many Marines made it home because of your overwatch?" 11, ma'am. 3 separate operations. 11 Marines who would have been in danger if I hadn't been on that ridge. Then you did your job. Master Gunny Cross would be proud. Caitlin hesitated. "Ma'am, I want to help teach the next class. Pass it on, the way you passed it on to me." Sarah studied her for a long moment. Saw herself at 19, eager and determined. Saw Master Gunny Cross's legacy extending forward another generation. "Then let's get to work, Corporal. Class starts Monday." They walked together toward the range. The sun was setting, turning the California sky gold and red. In the distance, Sarah could see students practicing, the crack of rifle fire carrying on the wind. "Ma'am," Caitlin said quietly, "can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Do you still think about them?" "The 47. Sarah was quiet for a long time. Then, "Every day. Every single one. I remember their faces, their positions, the calculations I made, the wind drift, the bullet drop, all of it." "Does it get easier?" "No, it gets different. At first, I counted them like scores, proof I was good enough. Then I counted them like guilt, lives I'd taken, even if they were enemy combatants. Now, Sarah paused at the range entrance. Now I count the Marines who made it home, because those 47 didn't. The operators who survived because I did my job with precision. That's what Master Gunny Cross taught me. That's what I'm teaching you. Caitlin nodded slowly. Excellence in protection. Exactly. They entered the range together. A new class of students was waiting. Young Marines eager to learn, ready to become part of a tradition that stretched back through Sarah to Master Gunny Cross, to all the scout snipers who had come before. Sarah picked up a rifle, felt its familiar weight. Gather around, she told the students. I'm going to teach you something they don't put in the manuals, something Master Gunnery Sergeant Daniel Cross taught me when I was 12 years old. She held up the rifle. This isn't a weapon, it's a tool for protecting the Marines who can't protect themselves. Every shot you take, every single one, should be in service of bringing someone home safely. The students listened, rapt. You're not here to become killers. You're here to become protectors. Warriors who understand that violence is sometimes necessary, but never celebrated. That excellence in our craft means fewer Marines die. That every hour you spend practicing, every repetition you master, every calculation you perfect, all of it serves one purpose. Sarah's eyes swept across the young faces. To make sure that no Marine ever dies alone, that no team gets ambushed without someone watching over them, that no family gets a folded flag because we failed to do our job with absolute precision. She set the rifle down. Master Gunnery Sergeant Cross served 26 years, trained hundreds of Marines, saved thousands of lives through the students he taught. He died believing in this uniform, believing in this mission, believing that what he taught would live on. Sarah's voice strengthened. And it will, through me, through you, through every student who learns these skills and passes them forward. That's the real legacy, not the kills, not the medals, the knowledge transferred from one generation to the next. She picked up the rifle again. Now let's get to work. Excellence doesn't announce itself. It just exists. And it's time for you to start building yours. The sun set over Camp Pendleton as Sarah began teaching, her voice carrying across the range, steady and sure. Somewhere in the distance, the crack of precision shooting echoed like a promise that Master Gunnery Sergeant Daniel Cross's legacy would continue, that his knowledge would never die, that every Marine he'd trained, and every Marine they trained in turn, would carry forward his dedication to excellence. Not for glory, not for recognition, but for the simple, profound purpose of bringing people home. One shot at a time, one student at a time, one generation at a time. Sarah smiled as she worked, feeling her mentor's presence like a hand on her shoulder, heard his voice in her memory, that gravelly rumble that had shaped her entire life. That's my girl. Textbook fundamentals. Excellence never changes, Sarah, just gets refined. And as the last light faded from the California sky, Sarah Vaughn continued teaching, knowing that this transfer of knowledge, this creation of new protectors, this multiplication of excellence was the truest form of victory. Not revenge, not justice, though that mattered too, but legacy, the kind that outlasted medals and monuments, the kind that lived in the hands and minds of every student who learned the craft, the kind that would echo forward through decades, through wars Sarah would never see, protecting Marines who weren't even born yet. Master Gunnery Sergeant Daniel Cross had given her that legacy, and now finally Sarah was passing it on. The rifle cracked in the distance. Another student, another repetition, another step toward excellence. Sarah closed her eyes and listened. It was the most beautiful sound in the world.